Now, Japan's largest steel producer, Nippon Steel, and U.S. Steel have sued the Biden administration over the U.S. president's decision to block their planned merger. The lawsuit accuses Washington of violating the U.S. Constitution and corrupting the review process for, quote, purely political reasons. Following the legal action, shares of Nippon Steel just coming online and they're trading lower by 1.3%. Their overnight U.S. Steel rallied about 8%. The American firm had lost about 6% just days ago when Mr. Biden's decision was first reported. And for the latest on the steel firm's lawsuit against Washington, Nick Harper has more.
This is a last-ditch attempt by Nippon Steel and US Steel to try and get their merger back on track, a merger that Joe Biden officially blocked last week, with the US president saying US Steel should remain American-owned. The two companies had hoped to combine forces, with the Japanese company buying US Steel and moving its own US headquarters to Pittsburgh, where the American firm is based. US Steel has struggled in recent years with falling revenue and profit. Nippon saw it as a target for takeover and as a way to expand its own US footprint. However, the Biden administration, citing national security concerns, blocked the planned deal after a year-long review. The lawsuit, though, alleges that review process, carried out by the Committee on Foreign Investment, was tainted by politics. The committee did not itself find a national security threat. However, Biden has warned there would be should the deal go ahead. The companies therefore claim Biden used undue influence to advance his political agenda. They also say last year's presidential election had an influence on their merger, claiming Biden tried to curry favor with union workers in Pennsylvania as he tried to get Democratic candidate Kamala Harris elected. The United Steelworkers Union came out against the deal, and both Biden and President-elect Donald Trump signaled in the run-up to the election that they planned to prevent it from going ahead. Trump, though, is not part of this lawsuit, as the decision was taken by the current administration. Remember, Pennsylvania was a crucial battleground state in the election, with US manufacturing a key concern for many voters there. Nippon Steel and US Steel now hope the lawsuit will persuade a federal court to overturn President Biden's ban, which would open up the merger to another national security review, one they hope will be free from alleged political interference. However, it seems like a long shot, as no review deemed a national security threat has been overturned by the courts. Nick Harper, CNA, Washington.
And Seijiro Takeshita, Professor of Management and Information at the University of Shizuoka, joins us for more now. Professor, let's talk about the legal strategy that Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel would have to employ or are employing in their case against the Biden administration, as well as the rival steel firm that is Cleveland Cliffs. I think we're seeing reports there that, the lawsuits have to be able to establish that Biden had ignored the law for political agenda, and also that the CFIUS review wasn't really done in good faith.
Well, actually, this is a typical case of emotion winning over rationale. And if you look at from any economic consequences or bigger picture, I think it's pretty clear that, the Biden administration made a very fatal, big mistake here. And I can easily understand why Nippon Steel and the management of U.S. Steel is basically trying to sue the government, basically to turn over the decision, as was the case back in 2014 when Sandy Industry, or a Chinese firm, their subsidiary in the U.S., basically won against the decision of, the government regarding, I think it was wind power. But of course, the size and the, knock-on effect is far greater in this case. And I think this is a very, very sad case where you will see a negative implication that will be lagged on from here onwards.
Yeah, before we look at the implications, let's look at, the other avenues that the two steel firms can take besides legal action, because that could take, that could prolong the matter for years. So what avenues could Nippon Steel take in this case?
Well, I think Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel, and basically the companies that are operating the free world have to see things in a much bigger picture. This isn't about Nippon Steel versus U.S. Steel. It's about unitarian state competitiveness that are increasing. Basically, the Chinese steel manufacturers that are increasing both in quantity and quality as well. So we need to gain competitiveness. And in order to sustain competitiveness, the whole reason for this merger was basically to increase and to compete with these rising powers of China. So if you look at in the bigger picture, Japan is basically an ally of the United States. We have 23 U.S. base here in Japan, for God's sake. So, basically one has to see things in a much bigger picture here, certainly not looking at, on a corporate basis, but the international competition or hegemony of war between China and the United States.
Right. I want to look first at what lies ahead. So the U.S. Steel's future, of course, that is going to be put in question when you talk about, especially you talk about, the whole reason being to put it in better position to compete with the rising power of China. And so without this deal, could it face more challenges in revitalizing its growth? I don't know, could it even perhaps open the door to more rival bids? And what is the difference between having a domestic rival trying to step in versus another powerhouse like, of course, Nippon Steel?
Well, the sad thing is, again, it's to increase effectiveness, and for that reason, we need to consolidate the free world, institutions. And, to basically barge that off is shooting one's own foot. And, as you kind of connotate, let's see what happens in 5 to 10 years term. If this goes on, and if U.S. Steel is on its own, or maybe merging with, another ineffective company with, lower amount of, I say, operating bases, then, we won't be able to compete with the rising powers of the Chinese. And, in 5 to 10 years' time, they will basically say, now we really have a serious security threat. And again, Biden is basically saying that, well, this is against security threat. But what he's doing is exactly that. And, those are the issues I think the authorities have to realize at this point.
It's also interesting because Donald Trump is also not for this deal, and he's known to be quite protectionist. So help us understand probably his motivations for being against it. I mean, now that the election is over, can we still say this was sort of his political promise?
Yeah. Well, motivation is quite simple. Populism. Nothing more, nothing less. It's about emotions. And touching on emotions of these, I say, union workers who, in my opinion, really aren't looking at the bigger picture, as I just explained. And this is something that the government really has to do, because if they don't really rectify this problem, then we'll have, further consequences of foreign powers or foreign money not flowing into the United States, thus weakening the allies of the free world. Certainly, I think this is a very negative thing going forward.
I'd also like to know about possible spillover effects on trade between Japan and the U.S. So Japan was a top source of foreign investment in the U.S. for the 5th straight year last year. Could the developments have a chilling effect on Japanese investment inflows into the U.S.?
Oh, yeah. Definitely, this would put a lot of things into freezer without speck of doubt. I mean, if you think of the fact that the government is one government trying to halt a rational good deal through, emotional factors based on some union members. Oh, for God's sake, obviously the Japanese or anybody would basically back off, So, we have to really get back to the rationale of things, and also, looking at things in bigger picture, as I've been explaining, in order to basically understand that this move is basically to secure the security of the United States and the free world, and not the other way around.
All right, Professor, I really appreciate your insights. That was Seijiro Takeshita, Professor of Management and Information at the University of Shizuoka.